I'm always delighted to introduce David Matthew.
I thought this would be easier for John if I just shared it. So before I begin, I just want to ask the people that participated in last Sunday's service to stand up in any way, whatever you did, whether you sang, filmed, whatever you did. Just look around the room. And any of you that have participated in this church in any way, please stand up. Anyway, volunteered, called people, whatever. Stand up. So just take a moment to just look around the room. And just let the person that you're standing next to, let them know that you see them. Just say, I see. And for those of you that see the people sitting down, just let them know that I see you as well. Look at this community. What a wonderful community that you guys are a part of. Look at all the people. There's really, we have the newcomers that are sitting down, but they can appreciate this too. And here comes Donna as well, you can take a seat, but I bring that up because I was in awe last Sunday when I came here. I love the speaker. For those of you that don't know how I know her, I was head of the Peace Ministry at Agape for a couple of years. So I was the leader of that, the co-leader of that in Agape. It's one of the first ministries established at Agape. And they asked me to be a part of it when I ran for peace in the Los Angeles Marathon a couple of years ago. And so peace is a very special place for each and every one of us, I know, but how do we get there? Right? How do we live a peaceful life? Because our everyday life is not peaceful. Our everyday lives are just living, really. Right? And so when we look around at this community, we realize that when the speakers come and speak, that don't look at me as a speaker or as a lecturer or as a teacher. Let us use this as a dialogue, as a community, to dialogue from the foundation of who we are, and then bring it outside to the world. Because when we look at the world, we see violence and war. We see a tremendous amount of conflict. We see a lot of hate. We see a lot of things that are opposite of what we actually are searching for or seeking. Correct? I mean, if you can for just 20 minutes today, just try to maintain with me as I talk, because we're going to use this as a time for each and every one of us to dialogue with ourselves. So as I'm speaking, use the questions that I'm bringing up as a way to look at yourself. Because if we don't look at ourselves, we will never bring about any type of love that we search for. Love is not a thought. Peace is not a thought. They're wonderful ideas. We have images that permeate from those ideas. Then from those images, we carry on beliefs of what those ideas may look like, correct? Don't believe me. Just look at that within yourself right now and ask yourself, as I'm speaking, what actually is thought? What is this thing that is thinking me? We never really ask the question, what is thinking? And yet thinking drives our society. It is used as a divisive principle. Without thought, there'd be no division. Right? But since we don't observe, I'll get to receptivity. Some of you are like, well, wait a second, that's receptivity. I'll get it. Just follow the train of the abstract for a second. So as we begin to look at ourselves and observe, right, a lot of you want to know how to. I want to collect with an intellect. I want to collect more knowledge, but I don't really want to do the work. Correct? I want to collect more knowledge from the speaker or the teacher or the books, but I don't want to do the work. Right? So on an everyday basis, we listen to wonderful speakers and books and music and all sorts of wonderful things that are unfolding in front of us, but we don't really want to do the work. We would like to, I use this as an example. Sometimes when I go watch Michael Beckwith speak, he has wonderful things to say, but we don't want to do the work. It's almost like we look at him as a thing. We go, wow, look at all the work he's done on himself. That's wonderful. He has so much beautiful things to say. The point is that we come here because there's something in us that feels chaotic. But we don't want to look at the chaos within ourselves. But the chaos is the conflict. And if we don't want to look at the conflict within ourselves, then we go out and we judge it in front of us. And we condemn others for being conflicted. Right? We condemn others for having beliefs. Correct? Do you see what I'm saying? Do you see where I'm going with it? So when we look at love, we first must understand the relationship of fear. So what is fear? Fear is the place that seems to go from the past to the future. And it's stuck in time. Time and thought exist in the same place. So when you're stuck in time, you probably have moments when you've meditated and you've lost track of time and you feel free. So we've all experienced moments of freedom. So we must see from that foundation that freedom exists, that there is God somewhere, that each and every one of you has experienced the semblance of God, whatever that is for you. But God needs to be investigated for you to understand what God is not. And then when you understand what God is not, then you understand what God is. Right? So all the places that you run from, that's God is not. Fear. Right? So we run from fear to go to pleasure. I don't want to be here right now listening to David speak. Right? I want to go somewhere where it's comfortable. I don't want to be uncomfortable, so I want to go to comfort. So that's what we do in our daily life, right? Something's uncomfortable in your life, and where do you go to? Comfort. Right? So I bring this up because the talk is on receptivity. So we're here to be receptive, but what are we being receptive to? Are you being receptive to an intellect that takes you from the past to the future? Are you being receptive to God? I don't know. I mean, you'd have to ask yourself that question. I don't know. I mean, are you receptive to God every single minute of your life? Because prayer, to me, I was just talking to Dan about this. When we pray, what we're really saying is, I'm lost in intellect, and I know that God's here. I know that the answer is right here. So I need to get out of my way. So we pray to get out of the way and to reconnect with what already is. So when we read, which is a fascinating book, if you haven't received it, you should get it after service. This wonderful book called Nonviolent Communication. And one of the first principles that it talks about is to observe. So in order to observe another person in front of you, we observe without judgment or condemnation. But if we can't do that for ourselves, how are we expected to do that for somebody else? Right? How can I hear you when I have this mind that is constantly wandering? Right? So when I talked to Desmond Tutu years ago on my show on peace, on redefining peace, one of the first things that he talked about was to bring up gratitude. When you're on the freeway, right? And he said, you look at the cars on the 405 in LA. Are you grateful? Right, because the intellect wants you to get somewhere. The intellect is driving you to get somewhere. But God knows. So maybe you're caught in traffic because God doesn't want you to go to where you're going so fast because you may get in an accident. Maybe you're being stalled for a reason. Maybe the meeting was canceled for a reason. But rather than just kind of going with the flow of life, the intellect wants to know everything. which tells you that it's afraid of the unknown. And if you don't know what's coming up, why would you be afraid of something you don't know about? That you need to look at that in your own consciousness. So, this book talks about observation. So when you begin to just observe the intellect in yourself, when you meditate and you observe the intellect, this mind, right? It's almost like you're a bridge. So you have the past, the future, and you're the bridge between those two things. And you're asking, David, how do I break that? How do I break this continual thought form, right? How do I break it? You break it by the realization of the timeless nature of who you are. So you break it with living the eternal, disconnected from time. Who am I without time? Write that down. Ask yourselves that when you meditate. Who am I without time? Just investigate yourself. Just observe where your mind goes. And if you can observe where the mind is taking you without being connected to it, then you'll see the fun little thing that you've been involved with. How do you end an addiction? You observe it. I could be in the middle of an addiction, right? But if I observe it and I watch the energy coming up through me, the thoughts racing, and every time I go through the addiction, I observe. And what happens? It will go away. All the things that you think you have problems with are unobserved ideas. Any problem in your life is an unobserved idea. Unawareness is just not being aware. So once you're aware of the idea that you're telling yourself, without any condemnation or judgment, something new will start to come forward, something bigger. We call it God, or you can call it whatever. But love is not a thought form. Peace is not a thought form. Compassion is not a thought form. And yet we use them as thought forms. They're fancy-filled ideas. It's a good word, fancy. So in order to receive that which already is happening, we need to be open to what already is. And how can you be open to something that is already happening? Well, if something is already happening, then there can be no problem. So what's the conflict? The conflict is you believe the intellect rather than observation. God is in the observation. God is not found in your intellect. You do not need more knowledge to be who you are. You do not need to go in the future to be who you are. You do not look to the past. The past is a bunch of memories that is brought in the present moment of conclusions that you've met in your life. Something happened in your life in the past, you made a conclusion about it, formulated a belief about it, brought it to the present, and you said, this is what you know. So then you go about your life from that knowing place and you call it limitation. But you're not limited. Once you observe or you put in place the observation of what you're actually doing at that moment, you'll stop then taking action from what you don't know. When you observe the intellect, right? When you're observing this intellectual mind, this intelligence, this thinking mind, and you just simply observe it, then your action comes from a new place. Fresh ideas. Fresh opportunities. You're no longer reacting to the thought and then doing it. Right? And as each and every one of us does that, it shifts consciousness itself as a whole. Right? You may not be able to do anything about war and violence and hate and people doing things to other people. You may not have any control over it. How comfortable are you with not having control? What is control? What is controlling you? What is controlling other people? When you can ask yourself those questions and literally be serious with yourself, you begin to unravel what you would call a mystery and be able to see the essence of who you actually are, right? Do you see it, you guys falling asleep? Do you see? You see where I'm going at? So in order to receive, you're already receiving what God is telling you. Because God is right where you are. Why would God hide something from himself? Have you ever asked yourself that? Why would God hide something from me? And who is this me? That feels like something's being hidden from me. That feels like that if tomorrow I may get it. There's always this endless stream of, maybe I'll get it tomorrow. Boy, they really have something. They really got it. You know, we're a community, as you saw. We're all a community, so we're all in this together. So this is a dialogue on reality, is what we're having here. You don't have to get what I'm saying, but there's a part of you that already knows it. Right? It says in the Bible, you don't have to add anything to you. Well, that should be a great comfort. And yet we're always trying to add something. There was something special last Sunday. I'm going to pull somebody out too, right? To watch Bob get up and sing in front of everybody. I loved it. Until Donna was like, oh my gosh! Because Bob, your spirit is so big, your heart is so open, it's beautiful to watch. You know, I was like, wow, look at Bob. Right? Christine's up there blaring, like, they should have an album. Dan's there, Don's there. It's like, the whole congregation should just put together an album and sell it. Right? And use the money to help other groups or whatever. Be beautiful. That each and every one of you are here for a purpose. There are no throwaway people in this audience. God didn't invent you to then have you beat yourselves up. So, we get to prayer to be receptive to the idea of what we're searching for, but what we're searching for is already answered. Now, how do I know that? Because I'm only speaking for myself. These are all things that need to be investigated for yourselves. How many of you have been in class, any type of class, and you're sitting there with a question and you want to ask the person, and right as you ask the question, the answer comes. And you go, never mind, I don't have to ask the question. I got it. Doesn't that show you something? That you don't need a guru or a leader or anything? What you need is to ask yourself the questions. Right? And yet we follow. We keep following and following and following. We're all following the same stuff. Getting shown the same images, looking at life the same way, but yet we all see it differently, right? I was telling Dan that I had a client that I was working with, and she was like, you know, I've been diagnosed with such and such, and yet when you tell that to me, the only word I hear is God. I don't hear disease. I don't hear sin. I don't hear misfortune. I don't hear death. I've been diagnosed with God. That's what I hear. Why? Because that's going to lead you back home. So she was like, I had this diagnosis. What do I do? So we talked about a couple of things. And I said, well, let's just do this. And she had some issues with doctors. I said, well, let's just use your doctor as love. Let's just say that your doctor, although your doctor may be looking at facts and numbers, is doing what they know best to do. But they love you. They want the very best for you. And then everybody that's in that room, the nurses, everybody that's with you now loves you. There's not a place where God is not, so stop looking for where God is not and running from it, right? So I get a call the next day. Because I went and saw my doctor, you're not going to believe this. I don't have anything. When you stop looking at what you have or don't have and stop creating images about it, miraculously they'll disappear. It's not really because of me. My job is to guide you to look in the correct place in your life. Right? So, my question to you is, do you question yourselves? Do you doubt yourselves? Are you skeptical with yourself on what you're telling yourself? Right? And I love it when I talk, because recently when I talk, it has brought up irritation with people, which means that we're getting towards truth. So it doesn't bother me, right? I don't need anything from any of you, in a good way, right? And you don't need anything from me, which is probably better for you, right? I say that not to be condescending. I say that because we're a community. We're dialoguing with them, right? We're just dialoguing. We're dialoguing about nonviolence. Well, you can't have nonviolence unless you have violence. Do you see how the word works? You can't have anything opposite unless you're conflicted. Do you see? You can't say that you want love unless there's not love in your life. You can't say that you want a partner if you don't feel alone. Right? Do you see what we do to ourselves? We take an idea within ourselves without questioning the idea. It forms an image. That image becomes a picture, and that picture becomes who we are. And so then when we come and we go, what's death? What is death when we look at death? Death is just simply the end of all the things that you've attached to. That's all. You've attached to your family, to your friends, to your kids, to your job. And then when it ends, when the death happens, it depends on the magnitude that you're attached to it, with the sorrow that you're going to have. If you're really attached to something, it's going to be mighty, right? We've all been around, everybody's done that. I've done it, we've all done it, been around friends. Oh, it's over! It's over, why? Why is it over? Why? I love it so much. Who am I without this job? Who am I without this money? Who am I without this house? Who am I? Right? It's endless. And you can tell by the amount of sorrow that the person has on how attached they actually are. But if you would just observe the attachment, it comes up, you observe. It comes up, you observe. With no judgment or condemnation, it would pass. Because if God is all there is, what is there to be frightened about? I mean, really, right? If we're going to be real about this whole thing, about the one power, one life, right? So I walk to Trader Joe's and I grocery shop, and I always come back, and sometimes I have 2 bags, sometimes I just have 1 bag. So yesterday I had 1 bag, and I was carrying it with my left hand. My body was being weighed down on the left. So I switched to my right, I got weighed down on the right. I kept switching, and I stopped, and I was observing myself switching. Kept leaning. Felt like our political system. I kept leaning to the left and the right, and nothing was working. So then something just went, why don't you just hold it? Huh? So I put it here. Felt great. And I was centered again. That's kind of what we do in our life. We get caught up in a thought that is about the past, taking us to the future, looking for comfort, looking for pleasure, looking for just to feel a sense of, I don't want to deal with this, but we don't look at what this is. But if we just observe what this is, we'll realize that what this is really nothing. And we can laugh at ourselves. Then we can go watch Jimmy do stand-up, because then we'll understand that life is just one big funny zone. We're just laughing all the time. It's one big comedy. And it's a comedy that we're doing to ourselves. Right? We see war and we want peace. But we don't see the war within ourselves, the conflict within ourselves. Where there's conflict within, there has to be conflict outside. Right? I love this book. Whoever selected it. Whoever you are. Even if you're not here. I love this book because it gives you the tools on how to deal with that which is in front of you. And the only thing that's ever in front of you is yourself. So use these tools to deal with yourself. Observe. And then what are you observing? Like it breaks up in here. Your feelings. And then ask yourself, what do I need right now? What is my need? And then what's your request? That's pretty simple. I observe myself. I observe what I'm feeling, which could be monstrous sometimes. Then I ask myself, what do I need? What is this feeling showing me? What is it that I need? I need to be loved. I need to be heard. I need to be seen. I need to be appreciated. All great things. It's okay. You can ask for it. But if we don't know what you need, and you don't know what you need, and then we all walk around all disgusted and angry and conflicted, then what's the point?